Alright, this video is one that I've been thinking about for a long time, especially with the more that I interact with people that are outside of the fandom and see the misconceptions that they have about the series. With the vitriolic backlash about Berserk's essay and its depictions always being thrown out by people that haven't read the manga or consumed any of the media, as well as like my recent search on YouTube, it's finally given me the stomach to discuss these things more broadly in a video. And I think I have to say this just so that I don't get straw man to hell and back. Essay is bad, and I don't think that Berserk condones it in any way, nor do I believe that the author was trying to get his rocks off when telling the story that he wanted to tell that sometimes includes instances of it towards both men and women. I believe, as with anything, sex and uncouth things in media are just tools that are there for the writers to use, and I think every instance of essay in this book are necessary and actively add to the characterization of either the world or the characters themselves. No instance of it in the story is there for titillation, except Isidro with his fucking stupid ass jokes. I really hate him, and I think that he's literally just there because the editors told Miura that he had to, but nobody even really brings him up in these conversations, which makes me think that they don't read the manga even more. So I won't talk about him in the video as far as like the things that they actually bring up, but I do think that he's really annoying, and I have a whole video dedicated on him. But a good example of like this sex for titillation thing that I just mentioned is like that one scene in a movie that probably nobody's seen, Citizen Vigilante. I didn't like the movie. He goes into like a brothel that he owns for literally no reason, just to fuck a random prostitute, and then leaves. He doesn't gain anything from it. It's there for quite literally no reason, along with several other things that happen in this movie. It absolutely makes no sense for this guy and who he is supposed to be characterized as. It's dog shit. Moving on. Hey, I'm trying to get to 500 subscribers by the end of the year. Currently halfway there. So if you like the video so far, then please subscribe. My packaging isn't good, but YouTube keeps pushing my content with thousands of impressions, and I'm just not generating a lot of clicks. As one of the lucky few to click on a poorly packaged video, then subscribe. Leave a comment telling me how to improve the thumbnails and other things like that. It will be greatly appreciated. Now back to the video. A lot of the backlash comes from people processing the depicted essay very differently depending on their own relationship to it. And that's a real conversation, but it's kind of a separate one from whether the scenes are narratively justified, which is what I actually want to dig into, as well as the frequency of them, which I'll get into later. Take the horse scene in Conviction, for instance. That makes sense. We know that demons are demonic, and we have seen at every instance of possession, or just seeing how apostles act, at least one of them doing this makes sense to be there. But more importantly, it allows Farnese to quickly see what makes Guts tick as a person, and allows her to see him very differently from how she initially saw him to that moment to the end of this entire scene without an exchange of any piece of dialogue that actually explores what I just discussed. It also allows Puck to further grasp what the eclipse even was, because he's seen glimpses of it throughout, like Black Swordsman and a little bit of Lost Children, but he doesn't really fully get it until this point, and he doesn't even get it even more until later in this arc where he talks to Godo and sets out on this journey. At this particular moment of the story, Farnese thinks that Guts is like a savage, and it's no coincidence that after he saves her and nearly kills her at the site of getting SA'd, she very quickly begins to see him differently, and in like the next couple pages after like we skip the fighting, she describes him as a painting in the flesh, almost like godly. That is not to say that this is some sort of setup for the romantic tension that we see throughout the story that is portrayed later. It's just to say that at the beginning of this scene, to the moment that he saves her, to the end of the battle, she goes through an entire character shift of how she even sees him, and then immediately comes back to how she saw him at the beginning, just because of how quickly her entire worldview of one person changed. All without saying a single bit of dialogue characterizing him to her. That is necessary and the epitome of show don't tell. The adult attack scene, or Jill in Lost Children altogether, is another example of this. This one is a bit meta, but this entire storyline takes place immediately after the readers gain the knowledge that Guts and Casca's child is not born and has its life forever ruined going forward, making you think as a reader of all the possibilities that they could have had if Casca actually chose Guts at the end of Golden Age. This storyline exists explicitly to show you exactly how cruel this world is to children while progressing the main plot. It shows you that quite literally, this fantasy that you're cooking up in your head and that you're imagining doesn't exist, and that there is no place for you to escape to within the manga and the world that it's actually trying to get you to confront. It's a meta commentary on exactly where your mind would go as a reader following Black Swordsman and the gut-wrenching story of Golden Age, to bring you, as the reader, back into the grisly reality to what Berserk's world even is, and it's brilliant. Expertly done. The adult attack scene is to show that Rosine is a monster who creates other monsters and not a sympathetic villain like people seem to think for some reason, that this world is cruel toward children regardless of the intentions of others, and that no matter what, you will always be in an evil setting that you have to fight your way through in this verse. That last one is also a meta commentary on escapism and the lesson of the story about fighting through life even when it's hard, just because it is meant to be hard. While completely messed up because it's happening to children, that is the point of the story. Guts and Kasuke's kid would never have been safe in this world, nor the imagined scenario that you cooked up in your head, because this is the world that they inhabit, and running away from it is literally fantasy that you're just not supposed to engage with. It's bleak and unescapable, and again, it is brilliant. Following a storyline where two of your main characters have their child taken away from them, with another storyline about how this world is specifically cruel towards children, is crazy. Absolutely insane. 10 out of 10 no notes. But again, this world is bleak and unescapable, either because of village neighbors being around and wanting to like touch your kids, or because of the monsters that actually inhabit this world, literally or otherwise. Another example that people cite are like the trolls at the start of the Falcon and Millennium Empire arc. On one hand, what I'm about to say seems like a bit pedantic, but the point of this arc is to show the reader that A, the realms are merging and why that's bad, and B, to show that the God Hand are evil and cannot be redeemed. Something that people also believe whenever it comes to Griffith or any of the God Hand members that might or might not be turning against Griffith in some way. The story makes you consider that if one God Hand member in this story can bring so much despair by just the realm that they oversee leaking out of the astral plane, then they just cannot be allowed to be fully realized beings. And all of Golden Age sets up how even becoming a God Hand member fills everyone who was ever connected to that person with so much dread and ruins their entire lives, or just gets them straight up killed. And this shows the impact that they have had on the entire world, or could have on the entire world. And this is something that the party is like never able to fully stop, because they didn't know that it was happening. But this piece of the story, no matter how much you actually like dislike it, or if the trolls are evil or whatever, which is like the point, gets recontextualized later as dread when you realize that this entire setting of the world has now become like this small section of the story, which is also shown when the world ending event of the world is literally just becoming a basic fantasy world. None of the things that we see in the initial reveal would carry any weight if we hadn't seen just how cruel this world is when just one astral being is in the vicinity of humans, and if we hadn't seen what a group of astral beings can do to one human village. Because absent the contextualization of the world being a fantasy world doesn't really carry any weight, because there's a bunch of stories in pop culture that deal with fantasy worlds and they don't ever tackle them as some sort of like negative things. It's always like mystical. But in Berserk, the fantasy of the world is always bad, and it's more often than not really bad. And the good aspects of the fantasy world are few and far between. And whenever you extrapolate this thing that's happened to one town to thousands of towns simultaneously in Midland, you're like, holy shit, this is bad, this is evil, and this cannot go on. It makes you want to kill Slan in the vain hope that this madness stops for this small little village. And then she shows up and shows Guts that he has no chance of killing a God Hand member, and just completely obliterates him. And like, yeah, he sends her packing because she lets him do it, and with Skull Knight with the assist. But it really just like the amount of evil that drips into the world, and SA isn't necessarily unique to it. We're in a context of a world that has plagues, famine, genocide, war, murder. This isn't necessarily like something that's out of the way, and it just fills the entire setting with this dread, which is what it's designed to do. too. And to have any other takeaway from that just shows that like media literacy is dead. This world is dangerous and evil, and there's so many instances of that being the case, not just with SA, but with everything. And Casca getting essayed by literal cultists that are obsessed with sex due to Slan's influence. Do I even really need to explain why that just makes sense? They're literal sex-obsessed cultists that are following Slanesh. I mean, hello? And I've heard that the problem with SA in Berserk isn't whether it makes sense within the story, which should be all the argument that I really need. But it's more that it pops up too frequently, which isn't true. Like, that makes absolutely no sense to me. Because are we saying that SA should only pop up when it directly applies to the plot, like the Eclipse? Based on what? And whose authority? Are we saying that the frequency distracts from the story? I don't think that's true, because if every instance further explores the themes or the characterization, then that's inherently not true. People think that SA is like rampant, but I can only list like 9 examples off of a book that's like 385 chapters long, and I don't think that that's a lot. Yeah, there's not that many instances of it. It's just like, it's always blown way out of proportion, to be honest with you. And I just think that it really boils down to the fact that war, murder, famine, genocide, and plagues are like impersonal evils. While yeah, we can point to one person or like a greater being as the root cause that forced these outcomes that can be applied to nearly every story, they don't really feel personal the same way that SA does, because SA to a lot of people comes across as much more personal and a much more deliberately placed thing, and to the point where they try to like extrapolate like how evil you are as like a human being if you even dare to consider it to have it pop up in your story more than once, even though it really isn't any different than any of the other concepts I just listed in the story. Is starving to death or being tortured in gruesome ways by a fanatical nutjob really that different than being violated sexually? I don't think so. Or is like the religious persecution angle in the manga more stomachable because religion bad as like a theme? Is that easier of a concept to digest than your fellow man is possibly evil? It just comes across as like immaturity to me rather than like real criticism, because these sorts of things and these concepts have been in stories that have existed for literally thousands of years. And it's ironic that people actually like think this way, because people hurl these insults toward Berserk about fetishizing SA, and these are like the same people who think it's immature to even have these concepts in the story in the way that they're presented, and they never actually like entertain what the story even is for the most part. But that's the frequency argument like dealt with. There's also a second, more specific criticism worth addressing too. I remember one creator and a lot of people on Twitter claiming that the way Casca or the princess are drawn is too revealing in their SA scenes, where it was much more restrained with Guts himself. But I think that this is like more of a change in the philosophy of how the world of Berserk should be like viewed, rather than it glorifying the action. In Casca's specific instance as a man, I think that the revealing nature of her scene is meant to show you how Guts feels, transporting yourself into his shoes. Casca isn't just having like the parts of her that she only revealed to Guts revealed to Griffith forcefully, but literally the tens of demons present as well. Guts and Casca feel exposed here, and the framing supports this, but also I think it being uncomfortable and deeply revealed is the point of the scenes, as well as just being real, which is why I don't consider it to be gratuitous. Its characterization, same as like the horse scene. Berserk really phased out its like symbolic, stylistic black and white contrast panels, barring like a few scenes more recently, as more of like crutch pieces to me from like the new team, rather than how Miura probably would have drawn it. It definitely feels like Miura was playing with a new stylization of how he wanted the manga to be real, something supported by how the Eclipse looks much more closer to Fantasia or any of the arcs going forward than any of the arcs before that, just stylistically. And it feels like he was storyboarding an anime that is meant to carry this specific stylization and its expansion from Fantasia, and then retroactively making the rest of the manga and art look like that, rather than it being for this one specific scene. Because if it was for this one specific scene, then I'd get that type of argument. But this sort of like hyper realistic element is taken from this point onward. Literally everything, man or woman, war, or even fucking having a carriage being in the background, or a dragon sitting on top of a castle. Everything is within this hyper realistic, hyper focused, everything is real type of framing and type of art style. But if you saw these like women getting violated in their barest, like true selves, almost like uncomfortably so, and thought anything other than disgust at the events transpiring, then you're a weirdo. And asking why when the point is literally staring in your face comes across as a lack of maturity. Because it's like the same people that had that essay scene in Andor. How can you watch that scene and think that it's fetishizing essay when the whole point of it is that it's bad and that this is happening on so many other worlds and that the Empire is evil and needs to be taken out? Like, it is just a lack of maturity and media literacy from people, and it genuinely just irks me. Like, go read One Piece if you can't handle the concepts being taken seriously in this book or in real life or anything like that. Because it's like, stay away from the shit that I like that's actually good, because eventually you're just going to make it worse. And I don't want you anywhere near Berserk or anything that asks to be taken seriously. And that's like the real tragedy in all of this. Every single one of these scenes I just walked you through exists because Miura was trying to say something. Not because he wanted to get his rocks off drawing them. Not because he wanted to do something safe. Not because he was like conforming to the political environment around him. And the fact that people can't tell the difference anymore says a lot more about the state of media literacy on Twitter than it does about the manga itself. Berserk isn't hiding what it's trying to do and what it wants you to think about. The horse scene, the adult attack, the trolls, Casca, all of it is right there on the page doing exactly what show don't tell means and what it's supposed to do. And instead of sitting with it, people would rather scream fetishizing from the sidelines because actually engaging with a bleak, unescapable world is harder than dunking on it in a quote tweet. It's just ridiculous. And I'm not saying that you have to like reading it. Obviously, I don't like seeing essay and things. I don't think that it's necessarily good to be there, but that's just because that's the point of the scene. And I don't have to like it if I understand why it's there. I don't like Cowboy Bebop's episode progression because I think that the pacing is slow, and I'm coming from a time where 8-episode miniseries that are like to the point as far as the narrative is concerned are just like the normal for me. But an entire season, 20-episode season, was the normal in the 90s, and every episode serves the themes as far as explaining exactly what the theme even is. Because the episodic anthology nature of the show shows how every single person in this show is running away from something, and they're using the world and the fast-paced nature of life to do it. And whenever things slow down in the anime, it feels like shit's getting serious, like it's supposed to do, because that's how the characters feel. I don't particularly like the show. I think it's a little bit boring to me, but I can understand why the show is the way that it is. But these people just like functionally can't do that. And it's just sad, honestly. Like, plenty of people read all of this and still walk away thinking that it's like too much and they drop the series. And that's completely fair. It's a completely fair reaction to a story that is asking you to be uncomfortable. But there's a clear difference between I don't like this and this shouldn't exist. Like, I would never say this shouldn't exist to Cowboy Bebop for being boring and not to the point, when it not being to the point is the point. And almost nobody arguing in bad faith towards Berserk seems capable of telling, I don't like this and this shouldn't exist apart from each other at all. So like the next time somebody tells you that Berserk is just like misery porn or something with like a big sword, you can just tell them that they just clearly didn't read the manga, stopped somewhere after Golden Age, or they're just there to like rage bait or whatever, because everything past Golden Age's eclipse is doing exactly what they claim that it isn't. It is character deep, it is character rich, it's there to make you uncomfortable, and it's there to make you question where the good of this world even comes from, if it exists. And I think that's what the coming chapters are about to explore, so I can't really speak on that too much. And I could keep doing this all day with every instance of like the 9 instances of it and discussing it. Absent Isidro doing like his shenanigans, whose whole comedy is from the 80s, like anime humor shit that I hate, while being a character who solely exists as a modern shonen protagonist in a world that predates those things. I just find it really disappointing whenever I see people's like inability to interact with the story in good faith on Twitter, because it means that this manga could never be fully adapted and likely will never be animated, because people are fundamentally children who just cannot grow up and just accept that something that they don't like exists. And it's really saddening. Most people like check out after Golden Age and skip Black Swordsman, so it's like no wonder that we constantly get Golden Age as like an adaptation. If you're interested in more more analysis, then check out some of my other videos. I talk about games and movies right now. So if you think that there's something that you want me to talk about, then leave a comment and subscribe for more if you're interested. I upload at least twice a week. So the next big review, like the Baldur's Gate review, will be about Skyrim, and then the next big review after that will probably be Baldur's Gate 2. And I don't really have anything else, so please leave a comment telling me what game or movie series that I should review, and that might take like 3 videos. But see you guys in the next video. Peace out.